There's several polls that definitely show declining support among black voters going from Joe Biden to Donald Trump. And listen, this is where they are right now. Why do you believe that that's the case? First of all, do you believe it's true? And secondly, why would you believe that's the case?
Well, the math ain't mathing, as they say. There's some manipulation statistically with some of these poll numbers. However, the bottom line is there is, I think, disgruntlement among many African American people about Joe Biden, and there seems to be a corollary attraction and to Donald Trump. He has an appeal. What is that appeal based on? Maybe, some young people say he's got swag. They think he's the kind of person who will go out here and will say what's on his mind without having it filtered through politically correct language. That's one. Number two, you listen to some of the rappers who say that they're attracted to Donald Trump, one of whom says, look, he gave out checks during COVID and the like, not understanding that those monies were released by an act of Congress, not the president, but nonetheless, they associate that with him. And then they think he's got this kind of swagger, he's got this kind of charisma because he's able to, be the kind of person that many of them ideally and fantasize about being. Tell you what's on their mind, tell you when to leave and when to come, and keep stepping. More substantively, I think some people are distraught with, President Biden over a couple issues: the Israel and, Palestinian situation, the war in Gaza. Some of them are quite upset about what they perceive to be President Biden's total capitulation to Israel and not standing up enough for Palestinians. Although one must quickly hasten to add, what do you think will happen with Donald Trump, who has been completely in favor of every action that Israel has taken, versus a Joe Biden who has tried to, apply restraint, or at least get Israel to apply restraint when dealing with Palestine right now? And then I think some people, in regards to their conservative values and beliefs, there's a group of African American people who are not only culturally conservative, some of them are growingly politically conservative, and they find some of the issues that Donald Trump addresses around, say, sexuality, around gender, far more appealing to them than they would perceive liberal cultural values to do. So I think when you put all that stuff together, there is, regardless of the degree of mathematical distance between the polling and the actual voting of African American people, there is some erosion of support among Democrats, and there certainly is an uptick of support for Donald Trump and the Republicans.
When you allude to mathematical deviation, educate the viewers out there, educate the listeners out there as to why we should take that seriously, because a lot of times so much is relying upon the polls. We look at the polls leading up to elections, and it gives us an indication. It's not to say it's always right, but it certainly is not always wrong. And in this particular instance, no one would think that Donald Trump, 4 indictments, 91 different counts, civil lawsuits, and hundreds of millions of dollars, wouldn't even be in a position to run for re-election, let alone win it. But clearly that appears to be the case right now. So when you allude to those mathematical differences, tell me why folks shouldn't dismiss that and say, wait a minute, look at what's happening here. Look at the momentum. We've got two eyes. Right. We see the momentum shifting to some degree, particularly after what you've just articulated about this current administration. Why shouldn't folks take that with the seriousness they appear to be taking that with now?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Well, even mathematically and statistically, they ain't calling like a million black people, y'all. They're not calling a million people, period, when they do these polls. It might be 200 or 300 people. And then the statistical difference could be an uptick of 6 or 7 people in either direction will give you a significant change in the polling numbers. So if you're talking, and our brother Michael Harriot, who kind of explained this on Twitter, talking about 6 voters made a difference in terms of registering a difference in terms of the uptick for Republicans. Now, I understand that and I appreciate that. That's real. But at the same time, speaking enough to so many other black people and hearing from them, I think it's undeniable that there's great frustration with the Democrats, and there is some appeal to Donald Trump. And as you've already indicated, here's a guy with 4 cases, probably got more. He got more cases than Pabst Blue Ribbon, as they used to say when I was a kid. He's a guy who's facing enormous consequence, potentially, for some misjudgments or criminal activities, and yet Black people, a certain amounts of Black people, certain segments of Black people, certain slices of the voterate feels that he is the appealing candidate. They think that Joe Biden ain't on TV enough, he ain't talking enough, he's not representing his viewpoint enough. Even the people who support Joe Biden, like Plies the rapper, right, did an interesting video the other day saying, where are you at? You know, we see Donald Trump every day. He's on TV. Every day he's being talked about because he's got yet another court case or some judge, imposing a fine on him or warning him against speaking. In other words, he's sucking up all of the media oxygen in the room. And the good things that Joe Biden is doing, he's tweeting about or sending in a way that doesn't get out to the broader audience. So not only are we talking about a shift in sensibility and perception among certain African-American voters being frustrated with Joe Biden for a number of reasons, there is also the fact that the messaging of Donald Trump for free, if you will, but also because of the enormous concentration of media attention upon his various flaws, is keeping his name in the print. Now, that old saying that used to be, hey, ain't no bad publicity. We know there is bad publicity, but when it comes to presidential sweepstakes and this man is still in the running, that calculates, that converts, I should say, in a way that does have a net positive for him. So we have to ask African-American voters, you've got to be a bit more sophisticated about this. I think many of us are. And then some have indicated, look, Black people don't come out to rallies. They don't do certain kinds of exhibitionist political if you will, consent or partisanship. What they do is just vote. In some instances, that's true. But at the same time, even among the folk that I travel this country talking to, and you do as well, there is a noticeable uptick in support for Donald Trump that we have to grapple with and take seriously.
Well, listen, it's always good and it's always beautiful to talk to you, my big bro, especially on intellectual items, because obviously you're one of the high-end intellectuals in this nation. Make no mistake about that. And we both have talked about it, and we know that recently, I got so much heat. I know a lot my team and other people don't want me to bring it up. I don't give a damn. I'm going to be who I am. And one of the things that I've religiously stated, I don't support Donald Trump. He's not getting my vote. But one of the things that I wanted to highlight was that, you know what, you're in trouble if you're a Biden supporter. If you're somebody that's planning on voting for Biden, if you're somebody that wants Biden reelected, you cannot just turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to what is transpiring before our very eyes. There are Black folks in America who have turned to supporting Donald Trump. That is just a fact. And what I wonder, and I say it, it's not just because of that's a reason to be worried about him returning to the White House. It's also the fact that the level of support that Barack Obama garnered not just once, but twice, in terms of the inordinate amount of people emanating from our community willing to go to the polls. That wasn't necessarily the case with Hillary Rodham Clinton. And I certainly have no reason to believe it's going to be the case with Joe Biden in 2024. I think that there's going to be a lack of participation, meaning voters showing up to the polls to vote for him. You're going to see some that just don't show up. That's a concern I have. Is that concern legitimate in your eyes?
Absolutely. And first of all, let me speak to that. You are a man of tremendous integrity and huge authenticity, and you call it like you see it. And the truth is that there is a troubling phenomenon and trend. There is a problem here, or at least there is a trend that is noticeable that we have to be honest about. We can't stick our heads in the sand and pretend that it's not the case. That's not an endorsement. That's an analysis. I happen to be a Joe Biden supporter, but that doesn't mean I can't see what's going on. That doesn't mean I close my eyes. And you're absolutely right. We have to take this extremely seriously because, as you've so intelligently pointed out, Barack Obama had a kind of inborn and inbred charisma. He had a natural advantage. he had house money that he was playing with in a way that neither Hillary Clinton nor Joe Biden possess. And that is the radical and immediate identification of African and masses of Black people with a candidate like Barack Obama. Now, arguably, Joe Biden has done more specifically for African American people in terms of the effect of the policies. The rate of unemployment is significantly lower. The fact that you've got a Black vice president in office and a Black woman on the Supreme Court, not only symbolically, but substantively in terms of what he's done with housing and economic inequality, and also for those people who have received refunds, not refunds, who have been forgiven of their student loans. So when we look across the board, Joe Biden has arguably done even more, and yet the messaging behind that is not equally as powerful. First, because he doesn't have the inbuilt advantage of a Barack Obama, and secondly, because sometimes Democrats are loath to get out there and brag about what they're doing. You got to get out there and brag and tell the people what you're doing. You've got to announce it from your bully pulpit as he crisscrosses this nation on his campaign stops to talk about what's going on and to figure out new media, to figure out social media, to figure out the old school stuff, and make sure that you're involving the Black media in your plans, which has often been a criticism levied by people within the media. So when we put all that stuff together, it is necessary at this point to warn folk, not after it's over. Well, I tell you, I did see this, but I didn't say anything. Say it now. This is the time for us to make acute analysis and serious scrutiny about what's happening. So with the purpose of, arming Black people with knowledge that will allow them to vote the right way.
Before I move on to my next question, I want you to take a look at this post from Fox News analyst Josh Kraushaar. That's his name. I want you to take a look at this because I want you to see it, and I want to put it up on the screen here. Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden are essentially tied among 18 to 29-year-olds and Hispanic voters, even though each group gave Mr. Biden more than 60% of their vote in 2020. Mr. Trump also wins more than 20% of Black voters, a tally that would be the highest level of Black support for any Republican presidential candidate since the enactment of the Civil Rights Act in 1964. One of the things that I'm going to make it a priority to do on this show at least a couple of times a month, if not more, as the election approaches, Dr. Dyson, is I want to focus on the Black vote. I want to focus on the Black community. What we used to do compared to what we've done, what we're doing, what we intend to do. And I want you to highlight, being a historian that you are, the obvious answer to why the Democrats have had a stranglehold on the Black vote since 1964 is obviously because of civil rights legislation that was written in the law in 1964 by President Lyndon B. Johnson, even though people from both parties brought it to his desk. But ever since that time, according to reports about Lyndon B. Johnson, we do this and we'll have the Negroes voting for us for the next 200 years. And at a time, it certainly appeared to be that way. And because of that, people have held on to it and used it as a form of cynicism to say, the Democratic Party has taken the Black vote for granted. So as a result, we ain't going for the okie doke anymore. We're going to change this up. That's what some of the Black folks, who clearly are Trump supporters, are now articulating. I want to know, in your estimation, is there truth to that level of thinking, that level of verbiage being thrown out there by those Trump supporters, Black and otherwise, and how valid it is in your mind of an argument for them to make against the Democratic Party?
Yeah, look, if you're suffering in a certain way, and African American people across the board are, as the brothers in the street say, irregardless of your party, whether you're Democrat or Republican, there's no question about that. However, if you say under the Democrats you are frustrated and flustered because certain issues are not being taken seriously, or you don't think you're being heard, or you think you're being taken for granted, it's a kind of Bobby Womack approach to this whole thing. If you think you're lonely now, wait until tonight, girl. Okay, so the thing is that if you think you're frustrated and flustered under the Democrats, the reason the Republicans have not garnered more of the African American vote, and I'll tell you, it would be easy for them to do so because there is agreement outside of what I believe. I happen to be a progressive, liberal thinker within African American culture. The masses of Black people would disagree with me on certain issues in terms of LGBTQA, QI, transgender, and the like, and so on. I understand that. I don't lie to myself about that. However, what I say is the masses of Black people who happen to be conservative would find it more easy to vote Republican if the Republicans weren't so repugnant and repulsive in some of their explicit racist manipulations or their implicitly racist policies or outlooks. So in other words, if they weren't so focused on retaliating against the fragile gains of African American people and could find a way to make concessions in their own ideological tent, a lot more Black people would be gathered under there. Just because you're hurting in your left pinky doesn't mean that I'm going to go to somebody who's going to hurt the other three fingers. You want to hurt less, not more. And under Republican ideology and practices, look at the gerrymandering going on in state legislatures. Look at the drawing of voting maps that are dissipating the concentrated effect of Black voting districts. The Supreme Court just ruled a couple of days ago saying, I think it was in Louisiana or somewhere, that the attempt of the state legislatures and the courts to gerrymander against African American people and to draw maps that would disfavor them is constitutionally invalid. So this is the effect of the Republicans. They want to gain every advantage possible, legally or not, constitutionally or not. And I think that all of this discourse among Republicans about steal the vote and look at what happened, the truth is that there's very little of stealing the vote among Democrats. There's a little voting irregularity. What we can point to is the sheer manipulation of ideologues within the right wing or the Republican Party. Having said that, I think there is frustration among African American people. We ain't gonna be on no plantation. Well, what plantation you think you're leaving and going to? If you're on a Democratic plantation, if that's what you conceive it to be, which I don't, what plantation will you now go to? You think you'll be independent? You think voting for Donald Trump or the right wing is something that will serve your interests? There is no evidence of this. So while there may be frustration, look, I would like the Lakers to be in the finals every year because I'm a Lakers fan since I was a kid. But they ain't in the finals. It's going to be maybe Minnesota, and it's going to be maybe the Boston Celtics. Who knows? The point is, your team that you desire to be there ain't there. So the choices you have are who's there, not this fantasy land. I wish it was this case. And I think we have to suggest to African-American people, yes, we've got to sometimes bite the bullet. Yes, we've got to sometimes look the bully in the face and say this is true and not true. But we don't gain when we capitulate to interests that have evidently undermined our community and not shown much interest otherwise. Yes, it's hard perhaps for some people to vote Democratic and to be in that group, but it is far more difficult and far more paralyzing to make the choice to swing in the other direction.
Well, one of the things that I think, and I've articulated that on this show as well, that, people have had an attitude with me about it. I said, I think you applaud the Democratic Party. The greatest thing that the Democratic Party, or one of the greatest things that the Democratic Party has done for the African-American community in this nation is that they were the ones who gave us access to capital. Because when you talk about generational wealth, when you talk about, economic empowerment and what have you, they were the ones that played a significant role in facilitating that. And I don't hear the Democrats spewing about that enough. That's number one. That's one of the things that I said. And the other thing that I pointed out, Dr. Dyson, is this. And I took a lot of heat for this. But again, I don't give a damn. I stand on it. When I think about Trump and the lawfare that has been engaged against him, what I'm saying is I'm not trying to act as if the man is guilty or innocent of anything. The courts will determine that and we'll go with it from there. What I'm saying is it's not stopping him from being away from the camera. It's not stopping him from playing the role of victim. It's not stopping him from generating campaign dollars. And on top of it all, it hasn't stopped him from being the GOP nominee and the man in line to return to the presidency unless Biden is able to beat him. My point is, I don't think that they've taken that into enough consideration, and you're looking for the courts to come to the rescue instead of you finding a way to beat him yourself. I don't
Right.
know how much clearer I can be in stating that. Help me out here. Help me
No,
out with that message.
you're absolutely right. And then I was thinking when you were talking, you know, playing a little acronym game here, you know, he is a G to many of these people, right? Not the GOP, just the G, just in terms of street discourse. And OP, you're down with OP, right? So there is some grudging recognition among certain African American people, like, damn, I don't care what you say about Donald Trump. I don't dig him. I ain't trying to vote for him, but dog, you got to admit, he just don't care. He gonna say what he believes. He gonna tell you how he thinks it ought to be, and he's gonna move forward. There is something to many people that's refreshing about the departure from a political discourse that is so riddled with duplicity, with people not telling the truth, with people not coming out and saying what they believe. Now, so let's be honest about that. Having said that, you're absolutely right too, that people, you know, at the end of the day, regardless of the charges he's confronting, regardless of the cases he's got, he is out there every day on Truth Social and whatever other platform he has, in the press, when the judges are not trying to censor him correctly in terms of putting a gag order on him, when he keeps on talking and offending. Now, it's reprehensible in terms of the political substance and the moral substance of what he's doing, but at the same time, he gains eyeballs and earlobes. People hear what he's talking about, and they are forced to assess the veracity or not, the legitimacy or not, the authenticity or not. And so at the end of the day, that is a kind of bullheaded determination to be heard at all costs. That is attractive to certain voters who say, I'm tired of the BS I get coming out of these politicians' mouths. They're lying left and right and left. But here's a guy who's going to tell it like it is. I happen to believe that that is destructive for the country. I happen to believe that he has shredded any ounce of consideration for the other side and any ounce of political convention that suggests we have decorum and civility in a way. However, in these trench battles, it is very vicious out here, and Donald Trump is throwing mud in the face, sand in the face, using every advantage he has, name calling and the like. And we'll see what happens when this upcoming debate in June, where Donald Trump faces off squarely against President Biden, and see what the consequences will be. But we cannot underestimate the various forces of appeal out here that militate against the interests of African American people that they may be voting for. And we can't pretend that just because we think it's silly or crazy or dumb or unintelligent or counterproductive or destructive to our interests that it's not happening. We have to open our eyes and then try to strategize as a result of that.
When we talk about polls, you have some people out there who are talking about it, especially somebody like my buddy Roland Martin, who would say, you know what, there are black polls, there are white polls, and there are black polls. Do you draw a distinction with that? Do you agree with him on that these polls, because you alluded to its potential inaccuracies, and they haven't talked to every black person, and there indeed is a difference between white polls and black polls that actually exist out there, where there's palpable evidence to show that dichotomy that exists. Do you agree with Roland Martin on that?
Oh, absolutely. I agree with nearly everything Roland Martin says. But I agree
So
with Stephen A. Smith. With Stephen A. Smith. I mean, you know, smart people, period. But smart black people, I take them seriously. So you and he, certainly I take seriously. But yes, I mean, and look, you know, Martin Luther King Jr. used to joke about this. It was common in the black community. You know, when the census taker came, the reason we didn't get an accurate count of black people, Dr. King said, because they thought it was the bill collector. So because they thought it was the bill collector, they ain't answered the door, and we don't get our census counted. That's still a problem in many instances. But the point is, even if half the poll is right, we in trouble. Even if you cut down 50% of it, we in trouble. And we should take it as a warning sign, a volley, if you will, across the bow, politically speaking, that we got to do something. We got to get on our P's and Q's. I know Roland, I know you, and I know the most intelligent observers of our community have to, you know, are often, you know, sounding the alarm. I don't care what them polls are saying. Even if we say half of it is right, half of it is wrong, or it's off by so many percentage points, and it therefore doesn't truly represent. Ain't no problem, ain't no harm in overdoing it. At halftime, was it last night, Anthony Edwards was saying to his teammates, do not let your foot off the gas. So they end up winning by what, 45 points. So the point is that we cannot let our foot off the gas. We have to assume we have a formidable opponent, because we do. We have to assume that there is a bleeding off, a leakage of support formerly accumulated within African-American culture, and there is. And so therefore, despite the fact that those polls, I think, are off, and that there's a differential accorded to any objective person dealing with evidence and empirical verification of a fact, that there's a difference between white polls and black polls, that's true. But we got to act like we are in trouble and the house is on fire. And what is we going to do? That's where we are. And we have to be motivated to address that issue.
How disappointed, I'm going to use the word disappointment, if not flat out fearful, even though I would almost never associate that last word with you. How fearful are you about the Democratic Party not having a bullpen, not having anybody lined up, knowing this man has been in this picture, on this scene, this political scene, for at least 8 years and counting, and we find ourselves relying on a soon-to-be 82-year-old incumbent to give us 4 more years? What does that say to you about the party that you pride yourself in being a part of in this day and age?
Yes, sir. Well, first of all, I'm praying for his health. That's number one. As a Baptist preacher, Jesus, please help me out. So that's number one. But number two, more seriously, you're right. We do have to develop a bench. We have to generate. And here's the thing. Here's what I know about history, though, is that there's always a ram in the bush somewhere, that there's always somebody ready to step up that we don't even know their name. We didn't know Anthony Edwards was going to be the beast he was, drawing these comparisons to Michael Jordan 2 years ago. Heck, not even a year ago. We saw him coming. We knew he was great, but we didn't know. Is there a corollary in the political world? Maybe not, but then maybe so. There are very articulate, insightful, conscientious political figures. Some would say a Hakeem Jeffries. Some would say a Jasmine Crockett. Some would say, younger people, out of Congress, or Jamal Bowman and the like, who are seriously committed to making a difference. There are white and black and Latino politicians who are quite comfortable in trying to forge connections with people across the aisle, but then keeping their eyes on the prize. So that there are people who will certainly emerge, because necessity is the mother of invention. However, it is true that we must be deeply and profoundly committed and invested in the process of developing a visibly ready bench of figures to step up into not only the spotlight, more importantly, onto the stage to do the work that is necessary to encourage political progress for African Americans and Latinos and poor white folk and Asian brothers and sisters and so on, who are able to articulate the ideals of the American democracy in ways that are appealing and refreshing, willing to fight for the, quote, the small guy and woman, willing to stand up for those who are poor and who are middle class and do so. And there are many politicians who are able to do that. So we can't give into cynicism. There was a quote from a black preacher and professor who was the mentor of Martin Luther King Jr., Howard Thurman. And Howard Thurman said, never reduce your dreams to the event you are confronting right now. This event will not exhaust the infinite possibilities of your life or your political destiny. So even though it looks dreary now, we can't reduce our dreams to the dreariness. We've got to elevate ourselves. And remember this, if you think it's bad now, what was it like when Martin Luther King Jr. was alive, or Ralph Abernathy, or Ella Baker, or Joanne Robinson, or Rosa Parks? These people had less and did more. So what we can't forget is that we possessed within us the ability and the resource to pull a rabbit out of the hat, to insist that there will be a ram in the bush, and to make certain, not by just praying and wishing and hoping, But by working as hard as we can help shape the very destiny about which we have fear or about which we have concern. We are the answers we are looking for, and we've got to do the work necessary to change the future.
My very last question to you, Dr. Dyson, the wonderful Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, right here with yours truly, Stephen A. Smith on the Stephen A. Smith Show on YouTube. As we sit here and we talk about race and we talk about the black vote, particularly as this presidential election continues to unfold with Donald Trump and President Biden both agreeing to a debate at least this June, next month, and of course in September, although Trump said he wants it June, July, August, and September. But that's a different subject for another day. But as we sit here and talk about race, my last question to you would be, race relations of a different ilk, and that is alluding to a beautiful article that you wrote in the Philadelphia Citizen that I have right in front of me. If you're looking for it, go to the philadelphiacitizen.org to find this article entitled "Why Kendrick versus Drake," as in Kendrick Lamar versus the one and only Drake, is a proxy war. The rap battle everyone is talking about is really about race, identity, Black/Jewish relations in this American moment. A Citizen exclusive from a best-selling author and elite public intellectual. That man would be the one I'm talking to right now, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. What incited you to write this article that was published May 15th, and you can catch it now, and what message did you want to get out there and disseminate to the masses?
See, I'm glad I'm talking to the great Stephen A. Smith, because in other fora, I've had to hold my powder and be more balanced and so on. I'm pissed that Drake gets dismissed off the scene when he's been Drake for 15 years. And you act like you didn't know that. Now he's not really black. Oh, he was black when he's recorded more songs with Jay-Z than most of these rappers. Last time I checked, Jay-Z is real. He ain't fake. Challenging his racial identity, saying he's a culture vulture when he's a black man. He's from Canada. He ain't real. Idris Elba is from the UK. People still love him on The Wire. So why is it that being outside of our geography, outside of our nationality, raises suspicions about Drake? Now you can debate the war between Kendrick and Drake in terms of the quintuple entendres that Kendrick Lamar unleashes. Kendrick Lamar is a brilliant rapper and a formidable foe, but so is Drake. And what he's done to expand the horizon of hip hop is underestimated, even artistically, I'm saying. People, well, he goes into one style and he does that. And he goes over to UK drill and he does that. He goes over to bounce music, he does that. He goes to the Caribbean, he does this. Why are you looking at a positive as a negative? Cinco de Mayo just passed. They had a special Cinco de Mayo celebration for Jay-Z in Cinco de Mayo, because Jay-Z has been attracted to Latino culture, speaking Spanish all through his music. And they had an entire program celebrating Jay-Z. Was Jay-Z a culture?
And don't forget OG Juan. Don't forget OG Juan now, his brother, his right hand now. I mean,
come on, bro.
Juan Perez, please, come on now. We all know Juan.
And Desiree Perez, his wife.
That's right.
That is OJ Juan, and the woman who runs his Rock Nation. So the point is that is Jay-Z a culture vulture? No. We have to stop this narrow, punishing, pernicious, limited viewpoint about blackness. Yes, have a debate about who's the greatest. Have a debate about rhetorical skills. But let me tell you what, as Lupe Fiasco, no slouch as a rhetorician, and one of the greatest lyricists ever, said that he would put Drake slightly above Kendrick Lamar. That's a minority position, but it's a very powerful one. He's saying that Drake got bars. So we miss Drake because of this other madness, the distorting impact of the metrics that we evoke, his being Jewish and white and not so-called black. So was Barack Obama a mixed race person. And my dear brother, I heard, that he's a friend of both of ours. When we go in the Breakfast Club all the time, Charlemagne the God called him, he said, this half Negro. And I want to say, Charlemagne, there's a lot of half Negroes out here who have done tremendous work for African-American culture, so that the name calling, the kind of ad hominem remarks, as opposed to a full-on embrace of the rhetorical diversity and splendor that is Drake. to me, that would be a fairer fight. Then we could make an estimation of what's going on. And then that piece, of course, I also talk about this being a proxy war for other issues that are out there. And we can talk about those another time, but dealing with the war in Gaza, dealing with DEI, dealing with Black excellence, dealing with rhetorical power, dealing with education, dealing with the colorism we see in our own communities, because there's no question that light, bright, almost white was a thing, is a thing. And we have to pay attention to that. At the same time, we know that Clarence Thomas is a dark-skinned Black man. We know that Candace Owens is a brown-skinned Black woman. And they are legitimately Black. I don't contest their Blackness. It's the moral content of their identities and their public policies that I would have a difference with. So I'm arguing in this sense for us to understand the power and the prolific character of a genius like Aubrey Drake Graham.
We'll get more into that subject in the future because we got to go right now. You know what that is.
Yes,
That's
sir.
a fallback position. Anytime Black folks got a problem with other Black folks, somebody sold out in somebody's eyes. That's the ultimate argument. And I think that Kendrick Lamar heard himself with that one point that you just articulated so brilliantly. I got to get on out of here, but I appreciate your time, your brilliance, your excellence, your insight, your historical facts that you threw out there as well. Appreciate you, love you, and thank you for taking so much time out of your busy schedule. And by the way, I know that we're going to catch you soon because you're doing an interview with my man Bill Maher for Club Random. I know that's going to be off the chain as well with his crazy self. Love you, bro. I appreciate you, Dr.
Love
Dyson.
you too,
Thank
my
you so
brother.
much.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Take it easy.